Hey, good morning, afternoon, good evening, and welcome everyone. This is Ethics Madness 2024, a joint presentation of the 8 Mindsets podcast and the Compliance Podcast Network. I'm Jason Meyer. I am the founder and president of Lead Good Education and a co-founder of the 8 Mindsets initiative. And welcome everyone.
Jason, always great to be back with Ethics Madness. The question I wanted to pose to you is, do you remember what year or number this one is?
Wow, that's tough. We missed a few. I remember starting this, I think more than, I could have been 13, 15 years ago. For you and I think this could be number 10. When Ethics Madness very first started, it was a live blog, a live tweet stream. Remember those? And we had the tournament on in the background, and we're like typing away madly on keyboards as if anyone's watching their screen while they're watching the game. But the whole idea, and Tom, it's so good to be with you again. And for those who don't know, I am joined once again by Tom Fox, the very voice of compliance, and the founder of the Compliance Podcast Network. And the idea behind Ethics Madness is really an excuse. It's our annual excuse to talk trash about ethics in sports and to talk about sports as a source of lessons for ethics and for compliance, for entrepreneurship, for business leadership. But the idea all started as an excuse to give us a reason to obsess even more over the NCAA college basketball tournaments and still call it work. And here in honor, I am wearing my Sweet 16 shirt from last year with my beloved Princeton Tigers, who made the Sweet 16 in Louisville last year. And you know, I had to dress in their honor. The cool thing this year is, in 1 hour from now, in real time, as we're sitting behind the microphones, 1 hour from now, the NCAA men's round of 64 tips off, you know, I have left the legal center for today. Tom, you'll see I'm happen to be sitting at home. The big screen TV is right next to me. I'm all set up to completely immerse myself in some attempt to do work and still follow the games. Hey, on this year's Ethics Madness, on this year's show, lots of initials. We're going to talk about the NCAA, the PGA, NFL, MLB, and CTE. We're going to offer some standout ethical highlights, our anthem of the week, our respective picks for what a new feature this year that I'm calling One Slimy Moment. Perhaps the ethics low point in sports. Technology permitting, we're going to try and do this PTI style. Pardon the interruption. Longtime show on ESPN. Well, we're going to run a stopwatch to get us to move from topic to topic because we've got so much we want to talk about. Tom, ready to get started?
Let's rock and roll, Jason.
Okay. So our first topic is, well, the NCAAs and the NCAA, the National College Athletics, whatever they are. The big change in college sports over the last few years, one of the big changes, obviously, is the appearance of NILs. NIL stands for name, image, likeness, and it's basically, you know, the legal principle now that, yeah, college athletes should get paid for the use of their name and their image and their likeness in promotions. It used to be that they didn't get any money, even if they appeared in, you know, their face appeared in commercials for the local car dealer. Now a lot of athletes are making tons of money. And on top of that, there is the transfer portal that allows college athletes to move from school to school much more quickly, which they might do if they can get a better NIL deal at another school. In other words, they're playing for money. And now there's a new lawsuit with an athlete looking to get a shot of prize money when the school wins it. So does that matter to fairness? And, you know, and Tom, here's what I think. You know, you spent years of your career, you know, being Mr. FCPA. And what occurs to me is we have said in business that there's some pay that's not okay. There's some sales you can make that are not okay because they distort the game, like a sale based on bribery. So is there any parallel here you see between this, the sort of end of amateur sports in a way, and what we do about pay and compliance?
Actually, I go the other way, Jason.
All
I
right.
think it is a fabulous development. The plantation mentality of the NCAA should have ended about 1950, and it's only in the 21st century that athletes are being compensated, not nearly at their worth, but compensated in some manner for the literally millions of dollars these colleges and universities make off of them. I mean, one of the
Yeah.
biggest and best examples, I think, is Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M University. Texas A&M raised between 65 and 75 million dollars after he won the Heisman Trophy, and he got nothing of that. Now, he got paid a lot of money from a lot of other sources, at that point illegally, or at least in violation of the NCAA rules. But Texas
Yeah.
A&M got a complete windfall from him. I completely bought into the whole Manzielian mania. They sold out every football stadium they played in. They didn't make it to a bowl game.
Johnny Football.
Johnny Football.
Johnny Football.
But it's not just the millions that athletes are making. I interviewed a guy who helps high school athletes understand what NILs are and markets them largely in rural communities to places like the auto dealership, to other service organizations in small towns. And he gets them $5,000 or $10,000 a year. Well, if he can put together a couple of those, they can have sort of $10,000 or $20,000 saved up by the time they get out of college.
Well, and the other thing is, it's transparent, right? I mean, before NILs, it was like, well, the car dealer is going to loan you a car for a year, and we're going to do it this way and hope that nobody notices. And it should be okay under the rules. And that happened in colleges all over. Now we can just say, look, here's your money.
Or the college or the auto dealership was going to hire you for the summer, but guess what? You didn't have to show up.
You didn't have to show up, right?
So in terms of making money, I think it's an absolute fabulous development. On the portal, the relationship between the coach and athlete was always out of balance. I mean, I played high school athletics, very different time, very different place. It was very command and control. But at least at the high school level, you weren't treated like a piece of meat. You were a real person. And I think that got out of whack too, because coaches could leave anytime. And if a coach recruited you because you believed in him personally, or you believed in his system, or you believed what he was doing, and in the middle of your tenure, he left and a new coach came in, there might be a very different relationship. And then let me say a few words about these old guys who complain. Nick Saban, it changed. It's different. Well, guess what? It's always changed. It's always dynamic. You've been in this field much longer than I have. Maybe not much, but certainly longer. And you have seen dynamism. You've seen change, and so have I. And things always change. And nothing irritates me more than people my age or older saying, "Whoa, I want to go back. Why can't we do it the way we did it before, 50 years ago?" I mean, wake up, guys. There's 6 generations at the workplace. They're not all our age. And many of them have different values, and they want different things, and they want communication, and they want to understand the why. And so that's really the part that I see, that I try to analogize rather for the compliance professional, which is literally you have 6 generations at the workplace. And if you're a 72-year-old college coach, you're going to have to relate to an 18-year-old, maybe a 17-year-old. And you're going to have to convince them that their value system, your value system, meets their value system. And I think that's an important lesson for compliance. And I think that's an important lesson for corporate America as well.
Ooh, and with that, let's move on to our next topic, which is another NCAA topic. And I love that thought about translating that to our own workplace, by the way, and that, we better be used to what the generations are doing and what they expect and the way they approach things. My other NCAA topic is inherently about the tournament, and it has to do with picking the brackets. and whether we can look at the whole conversation about, all right, for non-sports fans, the NCAA has a committee and it sits down and it looks at the whole basketball season and it decides 1 through 68 who gets into the tournament and where they get seeded into the tournament. And you have teams that are sort of on the bubble and they get excluded, or maybe they get brought in. Virginia being the example of maybe they shouldn't have been in the tournament this year. And it's huge controversy, of course, because everyone has their own fan base. But it got me thinking about organizational due process, which is something we deal with in compliance all the time. So here's my example. When my beloved Princeton Tigers, when the Princeton women, for example, this year, who won the Ivy League tournament and regular season, ranked 25th in the country, go Princeton, go Tigers. When they were seeded in the tournament this year, they got a 9 seed. So that's like they were the 36th best team in the country, when all season they were like the 25th or 26th best team in the season. I thought they got distant seeding. They got matched against Iowa, which I feared would happen because it's just not a good matchup. And frankly, I wanted to root for Iowa and Princeton for as long as I possibly could. So I see all kinds of conspiracies and deeper purposes, right? Oh, they hate the northern schools. They hate the smart schools. Look how they paired up this Ivy League team against Vandy. And they probably said, oh, let's have the smart kids kill each other off. Right? I see all that stuff. Okay. Here's what I'm asking. Does everyone see that stuff? Does everyone, when they have something at stake, see deeper purposes and conspiracies? And there are certain things happening in politics that make us think that might happen too. And if they do, what do we do about that in our organizations when it comes to procedural due process?
Jason, I have to admit, I had no appreciation of Conspiracy Jason. You need to come and join Conspiracy Matt and Conspiracy Tom in the Conspiracy Corner. And I think we should start a podcast on conspiracies.
Conspiracy podcast. There we go.
That
I'm with you, man.
Don't see, but we see. You have taken this to an entire level, which I was frankly unaware of. So kill off the smart kids. Wow. So the next time I see Rice and Vanderbilt play, I know the reason.
You know the reason. Exactly.
Now I know the reason. So, okay. I had no appreciation of that.
But it does make me think that, look, we can look at the last, I don't know, let's at least go back to the beginning of the pandemic and say, when people have a lot at stake, when it hits them where their heart is, I think we see it makes you wonder if there's something going on. It makes you look at fairness in a different way. Maybe it make you look for fairness in a deeper way, in a harder way. And I think we can probably think of examples, in the workplace where we eliminate something that used to be there, where we tell you can't get that perk because. And does this mean we're just wired as humans to sort of look for unfairness? I think humans are very good at spotting what they believe to be hypocrisy, for example. And maybe that's why it's not enough to, why tone at the top isn't just walking, isn't just talking the talk. It's also walking the walk. I don't know. Am I linked? Do these connections make any sense?
Well, I'm trying to connect the lone gunman to institutional justice and institutional fairness. And I have to admit, I'm having a little trouble doing that. But I'm obviously not as advanced in this area as you are.
Wow, that I really am conspiracy, Jason. Okay. Well, it's good to know. It's good to know. Well, let's. I tell you what. We'll move on to our next topic, which is, the debate in another corner of sports for the last 2 or 3 years, which has to do with professional golf. Right. So we have the PGA Tour, the top professional golf tour in the world, based in the U.S., and the Saudis, Saudi government money came along and said, we're going to start another golf tour. It will have this different format. It will have different ways of paying people, and proceeded to pretty successfully pull away many of golf's top players to the LIV tour, this rival tour. And there were accusations, there were lawsuits, and suddenly, I don't know, Tom, 9 months ago or something, the PGA announced, hey, we've reached a settlement. And it turned out that they had reached a settlement to coexist with the LIV tour, probably to avoid what would have been hundreds of millions of dollars in litigation costs. But here's the thing. They reached a settlement apparently without really talking to the rank and file. The leadership of the PGA reached the settlement, and even members of the tour who had been very outspoken and had tried to be very loyal to the PGA came out and said, news to us, would have been good to be included. What settlement? What does this mean? And part of it was they put themselves and their reputations on the line in this fight. And suddenly the person they were defending kind of gave up. All right. So, Tom, this was Tone at the top. This was the very top of the PGA saying, time to settle. We can find a way around it. And the rank and file saying, say what? So is there a lesson there for us?
Well, let me start with sports washing because I am less offended by that than others. I think rich people have always invested their money in their little toys, and that's what the NFL is. And if the Saudis have the money to do it, I grew up with a father who said, as long as the color of your money is green, I'm good. And that's in many ways, I think, what capitalism is. If they got the money to do it, I may not like it. I may not like them as owners, but that's the reality if you're going to run sports as a business. In terms of the settlement, I think you're absolutely spot on. The Professional Golf Association is as member-driven an organization as there is in professional sports. The NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, the hockey players, they have unions, but the PGA is truly member-driven. And if you have
each member is like a business.
No, they're not like
literally.
They are a business.
They are a business. They have staff. They have people who travel with them. They have hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenses. If you're a top tour player, you're running a business of which you are the CEO and the main factory.
As a recovering trial lawyer, and the settlement of litigation is always the goal. And it's actually enshrined in the state of Texas that the purpose or the goal of litigation is resolution. Now, sometimes you go to trial, but that's rare. And so settlement, I thought, was always where this would end. But if you have a member-driven organization, you have to seek the members' input. And the leadership of the PGA was absolutely abysmal. To hear about it for the first time, for a Tiger Woods not to have been consulted.
Rory McIlroy, I mean,
McIlroy
literally changed his brand to be "I am Mr. PGA."
Right, and that's going to damage the PGA as an organization going forward, no matter what happens. As to the propriety of the, I guess when you sent our topics along, and you said Tone at the top, actually, I went kind of in a different direction.
Okay,
Jason, because I thought, okay, the Saudis are going to invest. They're going to want control. And what are these golfers going to do when Saudis say, well, you have to endorse this, or you have to endorse that, or you have to come to Riyadh for 3 months, or you have to do something. As you said, these are independent, literally multi-million-dollar independent businesses with their own brands, with their own reputations, and certainly their own values. And what happens when Saudi ownership literally starts to take control of the players? It's one thing for a creep owner to buy a baseball team and then bleed it out of cash, and all the fans suffer because the team suffers.
Interesting thought. What if the Saudis decide to buy, Callaway or TaylorMade, right? They create their own golf equipment manufacturer,
right? And you shall
take it from there. So then the lesson to me is we all have our own individual ethical decisions to make about who we will accept money from, and whether it's okay to accept money from them based on who they are. And I guess that's the way it's gonna have to be, is that it's up to us as opposed to, as opposed to some other system. I guess my main piece of advice is if the Saudis call a pro and say, hey, we want to talk to you about this, come to our embassy. Maybe you want to have second thoughts.
Meet him at Starbucks.
Yeah. All right. The timer went off. Next topic, Tom. Next topic is rule changes. And I thought this was a really interesting demonstration this year. So the NFL made a change to its overtime rules, which had long been controversial. And the Super Bowl wound up being decided by those rules. The Super Bowl this year was under new overtime rules, which said both teams get a turn, no matter what. And I actually didn't even realize that, right? Whether the first team scores a field goal or touchdown or not, each team gets a full possession, no matter what. That decided the Super Bowl. And there was no complaining about okay, well, that wasn't a fair rule. It's like the rule change worked. And everyone suddenly thought the overtime rules were fair. Major League Baseball, even more interestingly to me, made a host of rule changes that went into effect in the 2023 season, installing a pitch clock, installing a clock on batters, making bases larger, which effectively shortened the base path between first and second, cutting down the number of pitcher throws to first, all of which was intended to boost getting rid of the shift of defensive players, all of which was intended to both boost offense and speed the game. And this, despite the fact that baseball of all sports is so locked in history, is so tied to its statistics and being able to make statistical comparisons across generations and decades. And the result of all these rule changes was, again, tremendously successful. I think much more so than even the MLB expected. It turned out everyone really liked the new rules. More people watched baseball. Everyone said, hey, it's so much easier to watch now. It's so much more entertaining. I can go to a game and be done in less than 3 hours. It's not a lifetime commitment anymore. So what does that whole process and result and debate tell us about our own programs and policies?
Well, let me start.
Yeah, you start, and then I'll tell you my thought. Yeah, go for it.
All right. Well, let me start with the NFL, because I don't want to talk about the change. I want to talk about the respective teams' responses to the change, because in the area that we both practice, there's regulatory change, there's prosecutorial change, and different focus by the prosecutors, such as the Department of Justice. And for me, the biggest lesson, Jason, was the Kansas City Chiefs discussed the new rule and practiced for it in the preseason. And the San Francisco 49ers, apparently, the players were unaware of it. They were confused. I have to assume the coach was aware of it, but I don't know the answer to that because he didn't really talk about that. But it impressed upon me the need to keep up with the rules, keep up with rule changes, and prepare your organization sort of in a risk management profile. Our risks have changed because the rules have changed. What is our response in a risk mitigation strategy to this rule change?
Well, that's a great point.
So that was I'm fairly agnostic on how we decide overtimes, although I don't think it's fair if you don't have a chance.
Yeah.
So I think this was fair, and it was certainly more exciting. But it struck me that the offensive tackle for Kansas City said, "Oh yeah, we talked about it in preseason."
That is such a great point, Tom, and it did really stand out. Like when the Chiefs, after the game, said, the coaches, like this week, the coaches went over it 4 times, what the new overtime rules were, what we were going to do in overtime, what our strategy was, that we did not want the ball on the kickoff. We wanted to defer on the kickoff, that if we scored a touchdown, we were going to go for 2 points right away. We didn't want the game to go any longer, win or lose on a 2-point conversion. And it was exactly an example of the power of repetition and training. Every player on the team was like, oh yeah, totally. We knew exactly what to do. And when San Francisco said, they wanted the kickoff, we all thought, that's awesome. And what are they thinking? You want the ball second under the new rules. The other lesson I get in what I brought up before our timer goes off is, to me, what the MLB did was about what in the 8 mindsets world, we call the mindset of the audience, the mindset of the learner, right? That whatever you do in leadership, in training, and engagement, you have to have in mind who your recipient is, the way they approach it, what they want. And baseball said, yeah, history is great. We've come up with all these strategies, but our audience is bored and they're going away, and we have to make this more engaging. And they changed their training protocols to make their training, to make their product more engaging. And it was a huge success. And I think we can learn from that. All right, the timer went off. I guess we won't talk about the tush push, the brotherly shove, except to say I think it was the right call, that the rules were not changed and we can continue to run that play. And the fact that one team can run that play better than anyone else.
Let me just pick up on your last point.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
Shouldn't mean we have to change the rules.
What you just said, our friend Carson Tams posits it the following: it's all about the UX. It's always about the user experience.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely. Mm-hmm. I went to the Astro season opener last year.
Yeah.
And what I text all my friends was the following: the game took 2 hours and 35 minutes. This is unbelievable. This is baseball like when we were growing up.
Yeah.
And you said it. The user experience was fabulous.
I went to I got to tell you, so years ago I was visiting family in Georgia and went to a Braves game. We had tickets for a game, and Greg Maddux was pitching. And we talked to the family a little bit longer. This is back in Turner Field days. And we got to the stadium, I don't know, 25 minutes late, 30 minutes late. The game's in the 4th inning because Maddux is just laying them down. But he was not a wander around the mound kind of a pitcher. He got the ball, he threw it. He got the ball, he threw it. And it was, it's in some ways we're more back to where we used to be.
Right.
Then this changes the game. All right, next topic. I'll get the timer going here. The prevalence of sports betting, and betting on sports used to be reserved to friendly pools and back rooms, and now it is the largest advertiser, or one of the largest advertisers in every sporting event you go to. You cannot get away from the fact that you can just pick up your phone and bet any old time you want to on whatever game or minutiae of the game you want to. It's everywhere. We used to be scared of sports betting because we thought there was so much money it would change the outcome of the game. Well, we've crossed that Rubicon, and we're beginning to see. I think Tom, in some ways, we're saying it's like, okay, it's really not that big a deal, but it still has the opportunity to be a big deal. Kind of like a lot of things that we run compliance programs to avoid in terms of risk. In the news, there's a new investigation of Temple basketball, Temple Owls down the street from me in Philadelphia. And basically it's that the analytics they can run on gambling reveals weird betting patterns that changed the spread in Temple games sort of in the last few minutes before a game, where Temple was more of an underdog, like several points more of an underdog at game time than had been 30 minutes before, as if someone had information about something that was going to happen where Temple wouldn't perform as well. They're under investigation. No one's been named. No facts have really come out. It's strictly, the only thing announced is there is an investigation in progress. But it does give us a sense of what, this kind of level of sports betting may mean.
So actually, I want to rip my part from literally the headlines.
Yeah.
Because Shohei Ohtani was in the news, not for himself, but for his interpreter, who got so far into debt to gamblers in Japan, not in the United States, that he stole $4.5 million from Ohtani and wired that money to gamblers in Japan to pay a gambling debt. And what it really brings up for me, Jason, is what I heard you allude to at the end of your remarks, which is I think we're going to have sort of a more holistic approach to how we perform due diligence and how we perform ongoing monitoring. If Tom Fox wired anybody $4.5 million that ought to set off every red flag, red bell, clanging ding dong triangle in America, because I don't have 4.5 million. And it's unlikely I'm ever going to have 4.5 million, even if I hit the lottery. So when those types of transfers happen, that should generate a suspicious activity report. Well, somebody has to follow up on that. But here, there's absolutely no hint that Ohtani's involved, and I'm not suggesting that at all. But a person close to him had an unrelated gambling issue, big debt, and perhaps a problem, and it's impacting, Major League Baseball. Well, what's MLB's response going to be? Are they going to start looking at everyone around each one of these individual multi-million-dollar businesses that are called players? So we really have to think through this in a much more holistic approach. This week, Matt Kelly and I talked about a unified approach to corporate risk management. And I think we're really moving towards that in a lot of different areas. And that's what's the sports betting conundrum has really brought up for me, that you have to look at areas you may not have considered before.
Yeah, I wonder if this is a place where the corporate world actually has lessons for the sports world. Because I just went through a stream of consciousness, like, well, what would the analog be if you could bet on every minutia of business, and what would that do to business behavior? And wait a minute, that's called the stock market. We already have legalized gambling on businesses. And we have seen ways in which that can corrupt the businesses or corrupt people within the businesses. And we've developed rules around that and things we monitor. So, maybe legalized gambling is just the stock market of sports, in a way. I think mostly it's just a good way for governments to get a piece of the action. But it will be interesting to watch what it means, and to watch the extent that that statistics, analytics, maybe even AI play a role in that compliance, and we can look for lessons we can learn from that. All right. Well, the stopwatch is going off, although for some reason there it is. There's the sound. Okay. I was going to diss the technology, and I didn't have good reason to do it. Our next topic that occurred to me as a matter of ethics, and suddenly I realized, wait a minute, this is like an ethical elephant in the room. If you're an Alabama fan, it's literally the elephant in the room, which is about sports injuries and how we ethically approach them. And here's the root of the issue, and this is an issue in my own household, right? So football, we know football has led to traumatic brain injury, CTE, all kinds of health problems for veteran players. Football's done some things to make the game safer, put in concussion protocols, change the equipment, things like that. But it's still a violent and dangerous game. And for those of us who are fans of Jason Kelce and his years-long conversations about what would eventually drive him to retirement, go Birds. We have seen that soccer is the sport with the second highest level of concussions. Rugby, basically these major sports, and let's take all the forms of football all over the globe combined, make the most popular sport in the world. They're beloved. We love our teams, and yet we're sending out athletes knowing that they're at great personal physical risk. And so what's the ethics of fandom? And I can tell you in my own house, as a member of my family, it's like when it's, Sunday or it's Monday night and I settle down and I really want to watch that game, he goes away. And he goes away because it's like, I'm sorry, I just cannot watch this knowing these people are voluntarily, leaving themselves out to be, to suffer brain damage. This is what you could call the rollerball problem if you're an old movie fan. The problem with the movie Rollerball is the violence in the movie was so good. It failed was so exciting that it failed to make the point that violence in sports was bad. But what are our ethics as fans when we watch that? Where is our responsibility?
This is a very difficult conundrum for me.
Yeah.
I played high school football. I love football. I've loved it all the way in the intervening years. I love it today. Um, I taught my wife to love it, or at least tolerate it. Uh, and and I was as big a fan of big hits as anyone in the world. And my view of that has changed now.
Mm-hmm.
And I cringe now when I see those. Having said all that, I had more concussions riding bicycles than playing football.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't play football professionally, and I certainly didn't ride bikes professionally. But if you do sports, you're going to fall or you're going to injure yourself. And that's just the nature of any activity, what competitive or non-competitive, because I had one set of concussions, non-competitive bike racing. I just went over. So, but my view on that has changed. And I don't think the NFL has done enough, but I heard an interview with Danny Amendola,
Mm-hmm.
A former Patriot receiver, who talked about the change he saw in the league around those types of hits. And he said he came in the league in 2009, and getting lit up was a part of being a receiver. But he said by sort of 2014, 2015, he felt like he might get hit running across the middle of the field, but he wasn't going to be concussed, and he wasn't going to have his head taken off. And it would be a hard hit between his basically shoulders and waist. But that's not the end of it for football. I was a defensive back, and I would often go for a guy's knees, a rolling block to tackle him. Well, if you do that to a big guy, he's got his knee planted, you're going to wipe out his knee.
Mm-hmm.
And that could, literally end his career. So you're absolutely right. Football's an incredibly violent sport. And short of playing flag football, and that might not even be enough given the competitive nature of Jason Kelce and his brother, they may, we're always going to have that. But my views have evolved, and if there's any significance to that, maybe other fans have evolved in their views as well.
Yeah, I think maybe the ethical line is exactly that. Can we what can we? And you're seeing that, I think, some in like when the concussion protocols are not clearly followed, like they weren't for Tua of the Dolphins. And it's like, there's real criticism for not pulling the guy off the field. I think there's less criticism now when somebody's off the field. He seems like he's fine. People are just coming to a better understanding of all of this. And it's very hard for me to give up my fandom, notwithstanding that. So, maybe there's a lesson there. A couple of topics, maybe we don't want to spend our full 5-minute allotment on, but worth mentioning. Quick recap from last year on the topic of second chances versus zero tolerance. For a long time we were fans of zero tolerance policies. I think maybe not as appreciated now. And my question last year was, hey, when is it okay to root for the Astros? With the Astros pretty clearly, cheaters in the last decade. And you surprised me last year when you said, because you had been you haters gotta hate, and you had a long hate of the Astros for that, and I didn't blame you. But last year you said to me, nah, I'm ready to let the Astros off the hook. At some point you have to say about an organization, they've done what they need to do, and they're better now. So, again, what lessons can we draw? Here's what I like about sports as a comparison to athletics. For sports, so often it's like, our hearts are on our sleeves. It's part of our identity. If you're a sports fan, your team is part of your identity. You're up when they're up, you're down when they're down. And so our reactions to what happens in sports are so human and personal, and mix the logical and emotion. So if we have that reaction to things in sports, what does that tell us about how people will feel our programs within companies are fair or not fair, live up to their values or don't? So, like, Where are you now? I know you're okay with the Astros, but what are lessons you see on second chances versus zero tolerance?
Well, first of all, I would note for the record that the Astros lost all 4 home games in the AL Championship Series, so
Yeah, amazing.
no cheating at home.
Yeah,
They have 3 players left from the 2017 new manager. 2 new managers are down the road, so they're back, baby.
right.
We're
And one of
gonna
the
win it
players
all
who's
this year.
left is just so hard to root against.
Yep.
Yeah.
But here's really how I tried to think about it, Jason. In I think it was December of 2022, the Swiss company ABB settled an FCPA enforcement matter, and that made ABB the first 3-time recidivist under the FCPA. And they hired an absolute star from Houston to be their chief compliance officer, a woman named Natalia Shaheda. And she was a good friend for a long time. We knew each other in the Houston compliance scene. And at one point, she said to me, because I was kind of like, how could you go to that company? And she said, look, Tom, senior management essentially said, we have now 3 corruption enforcement actions against us in 20 years. Is this who we are? It's not who we thought we are. But apparently, you are what your score says you are. So we are going to change. And we're not going to change by saying, hey, guys, do business ethically and compliance. We're going to completely revamp our entire compliance program. We are going to drive culture to the very heart of this organization, just as we have driven safety. And we're going to be cutting edge in terms of compliance programs and policies, data analytics, senior management, not buy-in, but participation. And we're going to make sure we, as an organization, don't do this again. So the message I got and lesson I got really from her was that if senior management is committed, they can change a culture. I don't pretend to say it's easy. It's relatively simple, I think, because we all know how to build out a compliance program. But, you got to change hearts and minds. And I think that's the lesson I would draw, or maybe even pointing back to Siemens and their 2008 scandal. And they made a conscious effort to literally change their culture. So I've seen it work in the corporate world, and I think maybe that would be the lesson I would try to draw.
And there's another parallel there back to what we talked about before, like the LIV tour in Saudi Arabia, and what some golfers and others have said about that kind of effort is, look, the Saudis don't have a great human rights record, but we actually, on the one hand, one way you can look at this as sports washing. On the other way you can do it is they're basically inviting people in to say, this is how you might do it better. And we're going to live an example that shows that. And sometimes you got to give people a shot when they say, we'd like to do better, to help them do better. Or you abandon them and they keep doing the wrong thing. That's not really where we're from. Okay. Next topic is something, that I wanted to sort of jam in here. Because one of the 8 mindsets, the 8 Mindsets Initiative, bringing you this podcast, in part, one of our 8 mindsets is the mindset of the entrepreneur, that we're big believers that if you are trying to lead an organization, whether it's through compliance or just executive leadership or as an entrepreneur, that mindset of the entrepreneur is critical. That idea of resourcefulness, of independence, of innovation, of confidence. And I thought we had 2 great examples of the mindset of the entrepreneur in sports this year that I just wanted to give a shout out for. One is, we already talked about some, which is the approach of the Kansas City Chiefs, final drive of the Super Bowl. And I've become a fan of the Kelsey Brothers podcast, of the New Heights podcast. I have to admit, I'm on that bandwagon. And Travis Kelce, who is the tight end for the world champion Kansas City Chiefs, talked about the final drive. And what he talked about was, they all got in the huddle. They're 3 points down. So, right now they're losing the game. They have one drive to win or lose the game. this next offensive drive will determine who is the champion and who wins the Super Bowl. And the way he told it is his attitude and the attitude of the rest of the team in the huddle was, this is exactly where we want to be. This is the whole situation we tried to set up for the entire game, and we're right where we want to be. And I think about all those stories about pressure in sports, right? Under so much pressure, will he choke? Could he handle the pressure? And it's like they had such a mindset of positivity, optimism, confidence, ability, innovation, that the pressure didn't even enter into the situation. All they saw was opportunity. And the other example that I got this year of this was from Caitlin Clark, the star player for the University of Iowa women's basketball team, best basketball player in the country this year. Just so much fun to watch. Part of what she's fun to watch about her, and she has said this, is that she's just having a great time all the time. She broke the record this year for most points scored by a college basketball player. And when she broke the women's record for that, she did it with like a 40-foot three-point shot, what's called a logo three, because she was standing on the logo in the middle of the court just about when she fired the three. And it went in and it broke the record. And afterwards she was interviewed and she said, well, you knew I had to do it with a logo three. The confidence in that. The lack of pressure, only seeing the opportunity to send a message and not being afraid of it. And for me, in business and in leadership, those were hugely inspiring moments about how they approached the absent. They just took the pressure right out and made it all about what I can show. And I will be inspired about that for a while to come.
Well, Jason, I wanted to look at three traits of an entrepreneur that really I thought encapsulated both of the stories. Solution-oriented, adaptable, and willing to take risks.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that compliance professionals will literally embrace these because, for so long, compliance was seen as the land of business non-development, Dr. No from the land of no,
right.
All of those things we heard 20 years ago. And the most successful compliance professionals are those who really work to adapt solutions that make things work. It's about risk.
This way. Mm-hmm.
And corruption is a risk. Money laundering is a risk. Whatever the thing you're looking at can be considered a risk. It's how you manage it. If it's a high risk, it doesn't mean, short of being illegal, doesn't mean you can't do it. It means you may have to have a greater risk management strategy. It may take longer. It may cost more money. But at the end of the day, if the risk is that great, potential profit's probably pretty good too. So it's all about risk management and solutions. Two is adaptability. As a compliance officer, all you really have is your ability to persuade. You're typically not the general counsel who can stop something. So you have to be adaptable and you have to be able to persuade folks. And then never let them see you sweat. So cool, calm, and collective, however you want to call it. Some things are going to be said, and you can't be anti-fragile. You can't be afraid to fail. So those are really the things that I thought of. But I love your example of Travis Kelce. And I mean, not that I would bet, but I would say never bet against Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
For that exact reason.
Yeah.
If there's one guy, not in our lifetime, but one guy right now who I want the ball with 1 minute, 2 minutes, or in the case of when they beat Buffalo, 12 seconds on the 9-yard line. That's the guy I want with the ball because
the guy.
Nerves of steel.
Yeah, it's just phenomenally inspiring moment. Okay, Tom, it's time for our new feature as we get in to wrap up the show here to pick your one slimy moment. It's tempting for me to sing, but I won't because that probably violates somebody's copyright. You want to go first with your one slimy moment?
This is slimy, but I think it's so much worse. I was reviewing it in preparation for our podcast today, and it's a Northwestern football hazing scandal As I said, I played football. I was hazed. I was.
My
I did
son went to
horrible.
Northwestern. I went to the
Uh,
Outback Bowl. Used to be a Fitz fan, not anymore.
and when men get together, whether it's in the Army, whether it's in the football team, wherever it may be, boys will be boys, and I get that. But this was so far beyond the pale, and this is the 21st century. And the one I want to focus on is perhaps less of the hazing, the sexual harassment hazing. They made black players eat watermelon, and that just disgusted me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the symbolism of that, everyone, you don't have to explain it to anyone. Everyone knows what that means. And I can't believe in the 21st century anyone would make a black player do that, let alone a white player. So, yes, I think it's slimy, but for me, especially being a Southerner, it's so much worse than that, Jason.
Yeah, it was tough to see, and the lessons in culture there. I mean, if you're a student of organizational culture, to look at what happened in Northwestern, look back at what happened at Penn State, two schools where you would have said, such strong culture in these programs. Coach Paterno, Coach Fitz, they've just built these programs around their culture, and it's yeah, but there's a dark side to that when it's culture. When it's a cult of personality, and when you discover suddenly there actually isn't a lot of culture there, where the culture is not on a strong values footing after all. Just fascinating to look at. Tom, my one slimy moment comes from the Spanish football club, Spanish women's football, or soccer, as we would call it in the U.S. I actually wrote a LinkedIn article about this. We can share the link. But basically what happened in the World Cup is, first of all, the Spanish Soccer Federation largely ignored complaints and allegations coming from 15 of its elite players that there were all these problems within the program, that women were being discriminated against in the way the whole program was treated and run. 15 of the players refused to play. Somehow Spain still makes it to the finals of the World Cup and wins the World Cup. And in the moment of celebration of the World Cup, the president of the Spanish Soccer Federation, Luis Rubiales, grabs the star player, Jennifer Hermoso, on either side of her head and plants a kiss on her. Not just like a nice little kiss on the forehead. I mean, full lips on, non-consensual kiss. Super uncomfortable, creepy. Rubiales finally stepped down after the international incident that this rightly caused. He's actually facing trial for allegedly sexually assaulting Hermoso. He's denied wrongdoing. And Tom, there was news today about this guy, about Rubiales. He's going to return to Spain to face a judicial probe. He's in the Dominican Republic, but he will return to Spain to face a judicial probe into the business deal to hold the Spanish Super Cup in Saudi Arabia. And there's allegations of Saudi Arabian money tainting the Spanish internal championship, and potential charges of corruption and money laundering. So, Luis Rubiales, you are my one slimy moment. Tom, some quick hits. Right?
That was
go ahead. No, sorry.
Once again, I thought that was beyond slime, and that was so uncomfortable to watch. Again on the video, but the response was just horrendous, and hopefully we'll get a lot of lessons learned out of that. But I just thought that also went far beyond slime.
And it is exciting now to see that I think I have found myself as a fan drawn more to women's soccer and women's basketball in this college tournament this year than I am to the men's game. And then I saw Shaq say the same thing. And I think in some ways this attention is leading to that. I think the women's game this year is just a better game for what I like about basketball. Passing, it's a team game, that it's a more strategic game. It's a more open game. I'm enjoying the women's game more this year. And maybe the negative is leading to a positive. Some other quick hits, and then we'll do our compliance anthem of the week, as we always wrap up our 10 Mindsets podcast. Tom, my quick hit is just the opposite of the slimy moment, a shout out, a positive, a highlight. The number of athletes who are coming out and talking openly about their neurodivergence. Michael Phelps, I think in some ways did it first, but it's really become where all kinds of athletes or star athletes are using their platform and their attention to talk about maybe their struggles with mental illness, which is a different issue, or just things like their ADHD or their processing disorders, and really sharing what they have done to surmount those challenges, to not treat their neurodivergence as a deficit, but treat it just as who they are and how they're going to embrace it and use that to their success. This is part of an enlarging conversation about neurodiversity at work, one that my company, Lead Good Education, is trying to be helpful to for businesses, and especially help compliance programs deal with neurodiversity at work and the realities of that. It's just great to see these role models in sports.
Jason, I'd like to go in a little bit different direction because I want to announce the release of my third children's book. I did a trilogy of children's books. Book one, Being a Compliance Officer is Awesome. Book two, Speaking Up is Awesome. And the third one is Compliance Saves the Galaxy. In these books, they were designed to help parents teach their children about what they did, but I found that's much broader than that. Two things. One was the publisher of this, Dinosaur House, and Timmy DeMint saw something that I didn't see. And he said this would absolutely work, and he was absolutely right. So shout out to Timmy and Dinosaur House. The second thing is these books are all dedicated to my designated charity on the Compliance Podcast Network, Pawtastic Friends, who do dog rescue work. And so each one of these books tells the story about dog rescue across the galaxy, and all of the profits from these books go to Pawtastic Friends. So that's what I wanted to shout out to.
Wow, that's so awesome, Tom. That's so much fun. What a great idea. Thank you for sharing that. Now I'm going to have to go look it up. And if only my kids were little and I could read to them, among other things.
Available on Amazon.
There we go. Wow, that's so cool, Tom. Well, look, we always wrap up the 8 Mindsets podcast with what I call the compliance anthem of the week. And it's just the idea of like, what songs are there that can inspire us as leaders in our organization, get us through the tough times, keep us psyched up, that are, by the way, also just really good songs. And we've actually built a playlist of the compliance anthems on Spotify. And so I'm going to nominate the anthem of the week for Ethics Madness this year. And I'm going to nominate Winning, the 1981 hit from Santana, which is itself a comeback. It's like a song about a comeback story. And what entrepreneur and what compliance professional doesn't like a comeback? And we've even talked about them, right? Some disaster befalls, some bad news happens, and you find your way out to where you're winning. Terrific song. You'd know it if you heard it. Great Santana guitar work, of course, by Carlos Santana. And lead vocals, and actually I discovered, Tom, lead vocals not by Steve Winwood, who I thought for years was the solo guest recording artist on that recording, but by Alex Ligertwood, who is the regular lead singer for Santana. And that track just sounds a whole lot like Steve Winwood. Some of the lyrics, too bad it belonged to me. It was the wrong time and not meant to be. It took a long time, and I knew for now I can see the day that I breathe for. Friends agree there's a need to play the game and to win again. And now I'm winning. And Tom, always a winning experience to celebrate the NCAAs, celebrate March Madness with a little look at Ethics Madness with you. And it's been so much fun.
Jason, it's been a ton of fun. Can't wait till next year when we can do it again.
And hey, almost time for tip-off.
All right.
Go Princeton.